Good wishes to all of you. Chapter 20, Central Asian Contact and Mutual Impact audiobook. 1. Political aspects. The period that began in about 200 BC did not witness a large empire like that of the Mauryas, but it is notable for intimate and widespread contacts between Central Asia and India. In the eastern and central parts of India and in the Deccan, the Mauryas were succeeded by several native rulers such as the Shungas, the Kanvas, and the Shatavahanas. In northwestern India, they were succeeded by a number of ruling dynasties from Central Asia. Of them, the Kushanas became the most famous. The Indo-Greeks, a series of invasions began in about 200 BC. The first to cross the Hindu Kush were the Greeks, who ruled Bactria or Bahlika, situated south of the Oxus River in the area covered by North Afghanistan. The invaders came one and after another, but some of them ruled simultaneously. One important cause of the invasions was the weakness of the Seleucid Empire that had been establishing in Bactria and the adjoining areas of Iran called Parthia. On account of growing pressure from the Scythian tribes, the later Greek rulers were unable to sustain power in this area. With the construction of the Chinese wall, the Scythians were pushed back from the Chinese border. They therefore turned their attention towards the neighboring Greeks and Parthians. Pushed by the Scythian tribes, the Bactrian Greeks were forced to invade India. The successors of Ashoka were too weak to stem the tide of foreign invasions that began during this period. The first to invade India were the Greeks, who are called the Indo Greeks or Indo Bactrians. In the beginning of the 2nd century BC, the Indo Greeks occupied a large part of northwestern India, a much larger area than that conquered by Alexander. It is said that they pushed forward as far as Ayodhya and Pataliputra. However, the Greeks failed to establish a united rule in India. Two Greek dynasties simultaneously ruled northwestern India on parallel lines. The most famous Indo-Greek ruler was Menander, 165 to 45 BC, also known as Milinda. He had his capital at Sakhala, modern Sialkot in the Punjab, and invaded the Ganga Yamuna Doab. He had a great many cities in his dominance, including Sakhala and Mathura. He is known for the variety and widespread of coins in his dominance. He was converted to Buddhism by Nagasena, who is also known as Nagarjuna. Menander also Menander asked Nagasena many questions relating to Buddhism. These questions and Nagasena's answer were recorded in the form of a book known as Milinda Panha, Milinda Panho, or the Questions of the Milinda. Indo-Greek rule is important in the history of India because of the large number of coins that the Greeks issued. The Indo-Greeks were the first rulers in India to issue coins that can be definitively attributed to particular kings. This is not possible in the case of the early punch market coins, which cannot be assigned with certainty to any particular dynasty. The Indo Greeks were also the first to issue gold coins in India, and these increased in number under the Kushanas. Greek rule introduced a feature of Hellenistic art in the northwest frontier of India, but this was not purely Greek but the outcome of Greek contact with non Greek conquered peoples after Alexander's death. The best example of this was Gandhara art. The Shakas. The Greeks were followed by the Shakas. The Shakas or the Scythians destroyed Greek power in both Bactria and India and controlled a much larger part of India than had the Greeks. There were five branches of the Shakas with their seats of power in different parts of India and Afghanistan. One branch of the Shakas settled in Afghanistan, the second in the Punjab with Taxila as their capital, the third in Mathura where they ruled for about two centuries. The fourth branch established its hold over Western India, where the Shakas continued to rule until the 4th century. The fifth branch established its power in the Upper Deccan. The Shakas did not face any effective resistance from the rulers and peoples of India. In about 57 to 58 BC, we hear of the king of Ujjaini who effectively fought against the Shakas and succeeded in driving them out during his reign. He called himself Vikramaditya, and an era called Vikrama Samvat is reckoned from his victory over the Shakas in 57 BC. From this time onwards, Vikramaditya became a coveted title. Whoever achieved anything great adopted this title just as the Roman emperors adopted the title Caesar to demonstrate their great power. As a result of this practice, we have as many as 14 Vikramaदिtyas in Indian history. Chandragupta II of the Gupta dynasty being the most famous of them. The title continued to be fashionable with the Indian king till the 12th century, and it was especially prevalent in the western part of India and the western Deccan. Although the Shekhas established their role in different parts of the country, only those who ruled in Western India held power for any considerable length of time. For about 4 centuries or so, they benefited from the seaborne trade in Gujarat and issued numerous silver coins. The most famous Shaka ruler in India was Rudraman I, Anno Domini 13250. He ruled not only over Sindh but also over a substantial part of Gujarat, Konkan, the Narmada Valley, Malwa, and Kathiawar. He is famous in history because of the repairs he undertook to improve the Sudarshana Lake in the semi arid zone of Kathiawar, which had been in use for irrigation for a long time and dated back to the Mauryas. Rudraman was a great lover of Sanskrit, although he had Central Asian ancestors. He issued the first ever long inscription in Chasti Sanskrit. All the earlier longer inscriptions that we have in India were composed in Prakrit, which had been made the state language by Ashoka. The Pratyan's Shaka domination in northwestern India was followed by that of the Parthians. And in many ancient Indian Sanskrit texts, the two people are mentioned together as Shaka Pahlavas. In fact, both of them ruled over India in parallel for some time. Originally, the Parthians or the Pahlavas lived in Iran from where they moved to India. In comparison to the Greeks and the Shakas, they occupied only a small portion of northwestern India in the 1st century AD. The most famous Parthian king was Gondopharenus, during whose reign H.T. Thomas is said to have come to India to propagate Christianity. In course of time, the Parthians, like the Shakas before them, became an integral part of Indian polity and society. The Kushanas. The Parthians were followed by the Kushanas, who are also called Uchis or Tocharians. The Tocharians were considered to be the same as the Scythians. The Kushanas were one of the five clans into which the Yuchi tribe was divided, a nomadic people from the steppes of North Central Asia living in the neighborhood of China. The Kushana first occupied Baghdad or North Afghanistan, where they displaced the Shakas. Gradually, they moved to the Kabul Valley and seized Gamdara by crossing the Hindu Kush, replacing the rule of the Greeks and Parthians in these areas. They eventually established their authority over the lower Indus basin and the greater part of the Gangetic basin. Their empire extended from the Oxus to the Gangas, from Khorasan in Central Asia to Pataliputra in Bihar. A substantial part of Central Asia now included in the Commonwealth of Independent States, in the former USSR, a portion of Iran, a portion of Afghanistan, almost the whole of Pakistan, and almost the whole of northern India were brought under one rule by the Kushanas. Because of this, the Kushana Empire in India is sometimes called a Central Asian Empire. In any case, the empire created a unique opportunity for the interaction of peoples and cultures, and the process gave rise to a new type of culture which embraced nine modern countries. There were two successive dynasties of Kushanas. The first was founded by a house of chiefs who were called Cadphises and and who ruled for 28 years from about Anno Domini 50 under two kings. The first was Cadphises I, who issued coins south of the Hindu Kush, minting copper coins in imitation of Roman coins. The second king was Cadphises II, who issued a large number of gold money and spread his kingdom east of the Indus. The house of Cadphises was succeeded by that of Kanishka. Its kings extended a Kushan power over Upper India and the lower Indus basin. The metallic purity than found in the Gupta gold coins. Although the gold coins of the Kushanas are found mainly west of the Indus, their inscriptions are distributed not only in northwestern India and Sindh but also in Mathura, Saraswati, Kaushambi, and Varanasi. Hence, besides the Ganga, Yamuna, Doab, they had established their authority in the greater part of the Middle Gangetic Basin. Kushan coins, inscriptions, constructions, and pieces of sculpture found in Mathura show that it was their second capital in India, the first being Purushapura or Peshwar, where Kanishka erected a monastery and a huge stupa or relic tower which excited the wonder of foreign travelers. Kanishka was the most famous Kushana ruler. Although outside the borders of India, he seems to have suffered defeat at the hands of the Chinese. He is known to history for two reasons. First, he started an era in AD 78 which is now known as the Shaka era and is used by the government of India. Secondly, Kanishka extended his wholehearted patronage to Buddhism. He held a Buddhist council in Kashmir where the doctrines of the Mahayana form of Buddhism were finalized. Kanishka was also a great patron of art and architecture. Kanishka's successors continued to rule in northwestern India till about Anno Domini 230, and some of them bore a typical Indian name such as Vasudeva. The Kushana Empire in Afghanistan and in the area west of the Indus was supplanted in the mid 3rd century by the Sasanian power which originated in Iran. However, Kushan principalities continued to exist in India for about a century. The Kushan authority seems to have lingered in the Kabul Valley, Kapisa, Bactria, Khorzam, and Sogdiana, Kotar minus with Bokhara and Samarkand in Central Asia in the 3rd 4th centuries. Many Kushana coins, inscriptions, and terracottas have been found in these areas. This is especially so at a place called Toprak Kale in Khorzam, situated south of the Aral Sea on the Oxus, where a huge Kushana palace of the 3rd 4th centuries has been unearthed. It housed an administrative archive containing inscriptions and documents written in Aramic script and the Khorezmian language. The Indo Sasanians. However, by the middle of the 3rd century, the Sasanians had occupied the lower Indus region. Initially, they called this region Hindu, not in the sense of religion but in the sense of the Indus people. A Sasanian inscription of Anno Domini 262 uses the term Hindustan for this reason. This the term Hindustan used for India in Mughal and modern times was first used in the 3rd century Anno Domini. The Sassians, also called the Indo-Sassanians, ruled in India for less than a century, but they contributed to the Indian economy by issuing a large number of coins. 2. Cultural consequences. Structures and pottery. The Shakas Kushana phase saw a distinct advance in building activities. Excavations have revealed several layers of construction, sometimes over half a dozen, at various sites in North India. In them, we find the use of burnt bricks for flooring and tiles for both the flooring and roofing. However, the use of tiles may not have been adopted from outside. The period also saw the construction of brick walls. The characteristic pottery is redware, both plain and polished, with a medium to fine fabric. The distinctive modes are sprinklers and spouted channels. They remind us of red pottery with a thin fabric found in the same period in Kushan layers in Central Asia. Red pottery techniques were widely known in Central Asia and are to be found even in regions such as Fargana, which lay on the peripheries of the Kushan cultural zone. Better cavalry. The Shakas and Kushanas added new ingredients to Indian culture and enriched it immensely. They settled in India for good and completely identified themselves with its culture, as they did not have their own script, written language, or any organized religion. They adopted these components of culture from India and became an integral part of Indian society to which they contributed considerably. They introduced better cavalry and the use of the riding horse on a large scale. They popularized the use of reins and saddles, which appears in the Buddhist sculpture of the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD. The Shakas and the Kushanas were excellent horsemen. Their passion for horsemanship is shown by numerous equestrian terracotta figures of Kushan times discovered from Begram in Afghanistan. Some of these foreign horsemen were heavily armored and fought with spears and lances. Presumably, they also used some form of toy stirrup made of rope which facilitated their movements. The Shakas and Kushanas introduced the urban tunic trousers and heavy long coat. Even now, Afghan and Punjabis wear turbans, and the sherwani is a successor of the long coat. The Central Asians also brought in cap, helmet, and boots, which were used by warriors. Given these advantages, they made a clean sweep of their opponents in Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India. Later, when this military technology spread in India, the dependent princes turned them to good use against their former conquerors. Trade and agriculture. The coming of the Central Asian people established intimate contacts between Central Asia and India. India received a great fund of gold from the Altai Mountains in Central Asia. Gold may also have been received by it through trade with the Roman Empire. The Kushanas controlled the Silk Route, which started from China and passed through their empire in Central Asia and Afghanistan to Iran, and Western Asia, which formed part of the Roman Empire in the eastern Mediterranean zone. This route was a source of substantial income for the Kushanas, and they built a large, prosperous empire on the strength of the tolls levied from traders. It is significant that the Kushanas were the first rulers in India to issue gold coins on a wide scale. The Kushanas also promoted agriculture. The earliest archaeological traces of large scale irrigation in Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Western Central Asia date to the Kushana period. Polity. The Central Asian conquerors imposed their rule on numerous petty native princes. This led to the development of a feudatory organization. The Kushanas adopted the pompous title of King of Kings, which indicates that they collected tributes from numerous small princes. The Shakas and Kushanas strengthened the idea of the divine origin of kinship. Ashoka called himself dear to the gods, but the Kushana kings called themselves son of gods. This title was adopted by the Kushanas from the Chinese, who called their king the son of heaven. It was naturally used in India to legitimize the royal authority. The Brahmanical lawmaker Manu asks people to respect the king even if he is a child because he is a great god ruling in the form of a human being. The Kushana strengthened the sharp system of government adopted by the Shakas. The empire was divided into numerous satrapies and each placed under the rule of a starp. Some curious practices such as hereditary dual rule, that is, two kings ruling in the same kingdom, simultaneously were begun, which instances of father and son ruling jointly at the same time. It thus appears that there was less of centralization under these rulers. The Greeks also introduced the practice of military governorship. The governors called strategos Military governors were necessary to maintain the power of the new rulers over the conquered people. New elements in Indian society, the Greeks, the Shakas, the Parthians, and the Kushanas eventually lost their identity in India in the course of time, becoming completely Indialized. As most of them came as conquerors, they were absorbed in India's society as a warrior class, that is, as Kshatriyas. Their placement in the Brahmanical society was explained in a curious way. The lawmaker Manu stated that the Shakas and the Pradhyarans were Kshatriyas who had deviated from their duties and fallen in status. In other words, they came to be considered second class Kshatriyas. In no other period of ancient Indian history were foreigners assimilated into Indian society on such a large scale as they were in post Maurya times. Religious developments. Some rulers and others from Central Asia adopted Vaishnavism, which means worship of Vishnu, the god of protection and preservation. The Greek ambassador called Heliodorus set up a pillar in honor of Vasudeva at Nagar near Vidisha, headquarters of Vidisha district in MP around the middle of the 2nd century BC. A few other rulers adopted Buddhism. The famous Greek ruler Menander became a Buddhist. The, question, the questions and the answers that he exchanged with the Buddhist teacher Nagasena, also called Nagarjuna, is a good source for the intellectual history of the post Maurya period. The Kushana rulers worshipped both Shiva and the Buddha, and the images of these two gods appeared on the Kushana coins. Civil Kushan rulers were worshippers of Vishnu, as was certainly the case with the Kushan ruler Vasudeva, whose very name is a synonym for Krishna, an incarnation of Vishnu. The origin of Mahayana Buddhism. Indian religions underwent changes in post Maurya times, partly due to a great leap in trade and artisanal activity, and partly due to the large influx of people from Central Asia. Buddhism was especially affected. The monks and nuns could not afford to lose the cash donations from the growing body of traders and artisans concentrated in towns. Large numbers of coins are found in the monastic areas of Nagarjunakonda in AP. Also, the Buddhists welcomed foreigners who were non vegetarians. All this meant laxity in the day to day living of the nuns and monks who led an austere life. They now accepted gold and silver, took to non vegetarian food, and wore elaborate robes. Discipline became so lax that some renunciates even deserted the religious order or the Samgha and resumed the householder's life. This new form of Buddhism came to be called Mahayana or the Great Vehicle. In the old Puritan Buddhism, certain things associated with the Buddha were worshipped as his symbols. These were replaced with his images at the time when the Christian era began. Image worship started with the Buddhism but was followed on a large scale in Brahmanism. With the rise of Mahayana, the old Puritan school of Buddhism came to be known as the Hinayana or the Lesser Vehicle. Fortunately for the Mahayana school, Kanishka became its great patron. He convened in Kashmir a council whose members composed 3 lakh words, though roughly elucidating the three Pitakas or collections of Buddhist literature. Kanishka got these commentaries engraved on sheets of red copper, enclosed them in a stone receptacle, and raised a stupa over it. If this tradition is correct, the discovery of the stupa with its copper inscriptions could shed new light on Buddhist texts and teachings. Kanishka set up many other stupas to perpetuate the memory of the Buddha. Gandhara and Madura schools of art. The foreign princes became enthusiastic patrons of Indian art and literature and displayed the zeal characteristics of new converts. The Kushana Empire brought together monsoons and other artisans trained in different schools and countries. This gave rise to several schools of art, Central Asian, Gandhara, and Mathura. Pieces of sculpture from Central Asia show a synthesis of the both local and Indian elements influenced by Buddhism. Indian craftsmen came into contact with the Central Asians, Greeks, and Romans, especially in the northwestern frontier of India in Gandhara. This gave rise to a new form of art in which images of the Buddha were made in the Greco-Roman style, Greco-Roman style, and his hair fashioned in the Greco-Roman style. The influence of Gandhara art also spread to Mathura, which was primarily a center of indigenous art. Mathura produced beautiful images of the Buddha, but it is also famous for the headless erect statue of Kanishka, whose name is inscribed at its lower end. It also produced several stone images of Vardhamana Mahavira. Its pre-Gupta sculpture and inscriptions ignore Krishna, although Mathura is considered his birthplace and the scene of his early life. The Mathura school of art flourished in the early centuries of the Christian era, and its products made of red sandstone are found even outside Mathura. Currently, the Mathura Museum possesses the largest collection of the pieces of Kushana sculpture in India. During the same period, beautiful works of art were created at several places south of the Vindhyas. Wonderful Buddhist caves were constructed out of rock in Maharashtra. In AP, Nagarjunakonda and Amravati became great centers of Buddhist art, and stories associated with the Buddha were portrayed on numerous panels. The earliest panels dealing with Buddhism are to be found at Bodh Gaya, Sanchi, and Bharat, Bharhat, and relate to the 2nd century BC. However, further development in sculpture occurred in the early centuries of the Christian era. Language, literature, and learning. The Kushanas were conscious of the fact that the people used various scripts and languages in their dominance and therefore issued their coins and inscriptions in the Greek, Kharoshthi, and Brahmi scripts. Similarly, they used Greek, Prakrit, and Sanskrit influenced Prakrit, and towards the end of their rule, pure Sanskrit. The rulers thus officially recognized three scripts and four languages, and Kushana coins and inscriptions suggest a commoningly and coexistence of different scripts and languages. The Kushan method of communicating with the people also indicates literacy in their times. More importantly, although the Mauryas and Shatavahanas patronized Prakrit, some Central Asian princes patronized and cultivated Sanskrit literature. The earliest specimen of the Kavya style is found in the Junagadh inscription of Rudraman in Kathiawar in about AD 150. From then onwards, inscriptions began to be composed in Chaste Sanskrit, although the use of Prakrit in composing inscriptions continued till the 4th century and even later. It appears that some of the great creative writers, such as Ashwagosha, enjoyed the patronage of the Kushanas. Ashwagosha wrote the Buddha Charita, which is a biography of the Buddha, and also composed Saundarnanda, a fine example of Sanskrit Kavya. The development of Mahayana Buddhism led to the composition of numerous avadhans, life history, and teachings. Most of these texts were composed in what is now known as Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit with the sole object of communicating the teachings of Mahayana Buddhism to the people. Examples of important books of this genre were Mahavastu and Divyavadhana. Divyavadhana. It is suggested that Indian theatre owed much to Greek influence. Both outdoor and indoor theatres appear in the caves of Ramgir Hill, 160 miles south of Banaras, and there is also a rest house for an actress. The plan of the theatre is supposed to be of Greek origin. Some scholars doubt this type of Greek influence, but there is little doubt that the curtain entered Indian theatre under Greek influence. As it was borrowed from the Greeks, it came to be known as Yavanika, a word derived from the term Yavana, a Sanskritized form of Ionian, a branch of the Greeks known to the ancient Indians. Initially, the tree Yavana referred to the Greeks, but subsequently it began to be used for all foreigners. However, India's contribution to the development of theatre is undeniable. Around 150 BC, Patanjali mentions the presentation of such scenes as the binding of Bali or the killing of Kansa. More importantly, Bharata's Natya Shastra was an important work on rhetoric and dramaturgy and marked the entry of full-fledged theatre into India. The best example of secular literature is the Kama Sutra of Vatsayana attributed to the 3rd century AD. It is the earliest work on erotics dealing with sex and lovemaking. It gives us a picture of the life of a city bred person or Nagaraka who lived in a period of thriving urbanism. Science and technology. In post Maurya times, Indian astronomy and astrology profited from contact with the Greeks. Many Greek terms concerning the movement of planets appear in Sanskrit texts. Indian astrology was influenced by Greek ideas and from the Greek term horoscope was derived the term Horashastra that denotes astrology in Sanskrit. The Greek coins, which were properly shaped and stamped, were a great improvement on punch market coins. The Greek term drachma came to be known as drama. In return, the Greek rulers used the Brahmi script and represented some Indian motifs on their coins. Dogs, cattle species, and evolved pieces were exported by the Greeks, but whether they learned any craft from India is not clear. However, the Indians did not owe anything striking to the Greeks in medicine, botany, and chemistry. These three subjects were dealt with by Charaka and Sushruta. The Charaka Samhita contains names of numerous plants and herbs from which drugs were prepared. The processes described for pounding and mixing the plants give us an insight into the developed knowledge of chemistry in ancient India. For the cure of ailments, an ancient Indian physician relied chiefly on plants, for which the Sanskrit word is Oshadhi, and as a result, medicine itself came to be known as Aushadhi. In the field of technology too, the Indians seem to have benefited from the contact with the Central Asians. Kanishka is represented as wearing trousers and long boots. The introduction of the stirrup is also attributed to the Kushanas. Possibly, the practice of making leather shoes began in India during their period. In any event, the Kushana copper coins in India were imitations of Roman coins. Similarly, gold coins in India were struck by the Kushanas in imitation of the Roman gold coins. We hear of two ambassadors being exchanged between the Indian kings and their Roman counterparts. Ambassadors were sent from India to the court of the Roman Emperor Augustus in Anno Domini 27 to 8 and also to the Roman Emperor Trajan in Anno Domini 110 to 20. Thus, the contact of Rome with ancient India may have introduced new practices in technology. Working in glass during this period was especially influenced by foreign ideas and practices. In no other period in ancient India did glass making progress as much as it did during this period. Chronology. Before Christ 200, intimate and widespread contacts with Central Asia began. 2nd century, the earliest Buddhist panels in both Gaya, Sanchi, and Bharat, the Indo-Greeks occupied a part of the northwest, a much larger region than occupied by Alexander. The Greek ambassador Heliodorus set up a pillar in honor of Vasudeva near Vidisha. 165 to 145, date of Menander or Milinda. 58 to 57, the tradition that Vikramaditya, the king of Ujjaini, defeated the Shakas and an era called Vikrama Samvad started from this time. Anno Domini 27 to 8, Indian mission sent to the court of the Roman Emperor Augustus. 50, Cadifices group of Kushanas Cadifices group of Kushana rulers ruled from this date. Anno Domini 78, the Shakas era started by Kanishka. 110 to 20, embassies sent from India to the Roman Emperor Trajan. 130 to 50, the reason of the Shaka ruler Rudradhaman I. 150, the earliest specimen of the Kavya style in the Junagadh inscriptions of Rudraman. 2nd to 3rd century, the Shakas and Kushanas introduced at the rope stirrup. 230, the end of Kushana rule in northwestern India. 250, the Kushana Empire in Afghanistan and west of the Indus supplanted by the Sasanian power of Iran. Early centuries, the Mathura school of art flourished. 3c, the Kamasutra of Vatsayana. 262, a Sasanian inscription of this date mentions the term Hindustan, used later in Mughal and modern India. 3rd to 4th century, Kushan coins, inscriptions, and terracottas of this period have been found in a substantial part of Central Asia, especially the excavation of a huge Kushana palace of this date at Toprak Kala in Khorzem on the Oxus. 4th century, Prakrit inscriptions continued till this time. The branch of Shakas who occupied western India continued to rule there until this time. 12th C. The title Vikramaditya favored by the kings till this time. Thank you.